Hi.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim. Hi.
Hi.
And here we go. Thank you again to the Midnight Stars AA group from all over the world. My sobriety date is March 5th, 1989. My home group is the First Things First group in Cancun, Mexico. And today we're going to talk about the Akron pamphlets. And these are important because they were written by the people in group number 1 in Alcoholics Anonymous in Akron in the 1940s. So this is not Jim telling you what people did in AA meetings or what they believed or what they told their newcomers. This is the 1940s group, Dr. Bob's group, telling us what they did. The historical literature was written by Evan W. at the request of Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob felt that the newly written Big Book was too difficult for the blue-collar, normal worker to read. Evan was a former writer for the newspaper, and he wrote a manual for Alcoholics Anonymous in 1941, followed by a second reader for Alcoholics Anonymous. The literature is pre-conference, and so it's not conference approved, but this is what they taught in group number 1 in Akron, Ohio. There's a picture of the man who wrote it, H. Evan Williams, and there are 5 or 6 pamphlets from the Akron group. And because Dr. Bob wanted to add information for common people to understand, since he thought that the Big Book was written for people who were not more educated people. And he wanted something that everybody could understand. And that's why he asked Evan to write these pamphlets. So AA started in Akron 4 years before the publication of the Big Book. AA started in 1935, and the Big Book was printed in 1939. The members who were sober there came to be known as the Alcoholic Squadron of the Oxford Group. The squadron stayed sober by following the Oxford Group principles and carrying the message to other drunks, and they did this very well. There's a lot of eyewitness evidence about the first 40 AA pioneers who'd achieved astonishing success rates. Most of the early newcomers, the early first alcoholics, were very low bottom, last gasp cases. They had lost everything. And but when this pamphlet was written, they had been sober for a couple of years. So there were upwards of 40 alcoholics staying dry. And because of this evidence, we believe that the reader, us, we will be interested in the program that was working in Akron. Initially, Akron was very resistant to the publication of the Big Book. Bill even struggled to get feedback from Dr. Bob on it. After the publication, Dr. Bob asked Evan to write these pamphlets to go along with it. And there were other pamphlets written in the 1940s by other groups who wanted to explain the steps they thought better than was explained in the Big Book. This was one of them. It was called the Altram Group in Salt Lake City, Utah. And they, if you look down at the bottom there, they are even quoting in their pamphlet, they're quoting from the Akron, Ohio AA group. They're quoting from the Akron Manual. So very early on, the Akron Manual became very important. So now we're going to read from the actual 1940, probably 42 Akron Manual. The foreword says, this pamphlet was written and edited by members of Alcoholics Anonymous AA Group Number 1, popularly known as the King School Group. Akron Group Number 1 is the original chapter of Alcoholics Anonymous and includes in its membership one of the organization's founders, Dr. Bob, the first person to accept the program, and a large number of other members whose sobriety dates back 5, 6, or 7 years. The text of this pamphlet has been approved by the members of the group. The following inscription appears on the inside of the 2014 printing. This pamphlet was published by the Akron Group and has been reproduced to maintain the historical accuracy of the 1940 series commissioned by Dr. Bob. According to Wally P.'s research, Evan had been the editor of the Akron Beacon Journal newspaper, and he was fired because of his alcoholism. He got sober in May of 1941. And once sober is when Dr. Bob asked him to write some blue-collar AA pamphlets for the fellowship. As Dr. Bob explained, the big book was too complicated for many AAs, and he wanted Evan to present the program in its most basic terms. Evan evidently wrote 4 pamphlets: a manual, a guide to the 12 steps, spiritual milestones, and a second reader. I have included another one that we'll see at the end. They were published prior to 1946. So these are the 5 Akron pamphlets that we will be looking at today. And the Akron Group published this booklet at the end of 1942. No. There at the second paragraph, the cover of the pamphlet talked about Alcoholics Anonymous in Akron. The next paragraph says, and the manual could not have been written any earlier than that. The upper room was the name of some religious pamphlets that were put out by the Methodists starting in 1935. It was the most important source for classical Protestant liberal ideas in early AA. The upper room was a meditational book that they would read from in their meetings. There's a picture of some of the different, these would come out once a month, and the AA people in Akron would get them, and then they would read from these, like we read sometimes from the Daily Reflection or the 24-hour book. They would read from these pamphlets. So here's the text of the actual manual for Alcoholics Anonymous. And it starts, this booklet is intended to be a practical guide for new members and sponsors of new members of Alcoholics Anonymous. To the newcomer, the booklet is designed to give you a practical explanation of what to do and what not to do in your search for sobriety. The editors, too, were pretty bewildered by the program at first. The next paragraph says, to the sponsor, if you have never before brought anyone into AA as a sponsor, the booklet attempts to tell you what your duties are to your baby. That's what they called sponsees. Your baby, how you should conduct yourself while visiting patients, and other odd bits of information. And it says this booklet, the manual, should be read in conjunction with the large book, Alcoholics Anonymous, the Bible, the daily lesson, like the upper room, and other constructive literature. What is an Alcoholic Anonymous? Definition of an Alcoholic Anonymous. An Alcoholic Anonymous is an alcoholic who, through application of and adherence to the rules laid down by the organization, has completely given up the use of any and all alcoholic beverages. The moment he knowingly drinks so much as a drop of beer, wine, spirits, or any other alcoholic beverage, he automatically loses all status as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. There, the next paragraph is interesting. It says, AA is not interested in sobering up drunks who are not sincere in their desire to remain completely sober for all times. It is not interested in alcoholics who want to sober up so they can go on another drunk, or sober up because they fear for their job or their wife. At the top of the next page, it says, to the newcomer, it is your life. It is your choice. If you are not completely convinced to your own satisfaction that you are an alcoholic, if you're not ready to part with alcohol for good, it would be better for all concerned if you discontinue reading this and give up the idea of becoming a member. So this was very strict. You know, they would say, if you think you're not an alcoholic, then we'll see you later. Bye. Come back when you are convinced. The next page goes on there where the little arrow is. It talks about you should be able to judge if a man is sincere in his desire to quit drinking. It was very important for all of them to immediately start working with other alcoholics. It says you should be able to judge if a man is sincere in his desire to quit drinking. Use this judgment. Otherwise, you will find yourself needlessly bumping your head into a stone wall and wondering why your babies don't stay sober. Very important that we forget sometimes. Remember, you depend on the newcomer's sobriety to keep you sober as much as he depends on you. Never lose touch with your responsibility. Drop into his home or his office occasionally. Telephone him, talk to him at meetings, encourage him to look you up. Your responsibility never ends. On the next page, it talks about, again, where it says to the newcomer, where the arrow is. Now you're in the hospital, or perhaps you're learning to be an Alcoholics Anonymous the hard way by trying to continue with your work while learning to become sober. Most of the people, almost all of them, went to the hospital first for 5 days. That was just the way they did it. Some people would keep working, but most of them went to the hospital for 5 days. Down at the bottom there, it says, people will come to visit you while you're in the hospital or at home. Every single one of them is a former drunk, and every single one of them is trying to help you. You know, people come and talk to you. They're trying to help you. You should make it a point to supply your sponsee with the proper literature. The big Alcoholics Anonymous book, this pamphlet, other available pamphlets, a Bible, or anything else that has helped you. Impress upon him the wisdom of reading and rereading the literature. Study the newcomer and decide who among your friends might have the best story and exert the best influence on him. There are all types in AA, and regardless of whom you hospitalize, there are dozens who can help him. Next paragraph, accompany him to his first meeting. Take him along with you when you call on the next patient. Telephone him when there are other patients. Drop in at his home and telephone him, counsel him, and advise him. Okay. Here it says, this person that's coming to visit you and tell his story, they may have been sober for a week or for half a decade. But this person still has an alcoholic problem, and if he for one moment forgets to follow any single rule for sober living, he may be occupying your hospital bed tomorrow. He is going out of his way to help you. The next page, there we go. It cannot be repeated too often. Listen carefully at meetings and to when people are talking. Listen carefully and think it over at great length. Now you are not alone. Again, there where the arrow is, the one important thing in your life is the thing upon which depends life or death, complete and endless sobriety. Where the arrow is, says, first of all, after you get out of the hospital and you're back home again, and it says, first of all, your days will have a new pattern. You will open the day with a quiet period. This will be explained to you by your sponsor. You will read the upper room, the pamphlet, or whatever you think best for yourself. You will say a little prayer asking for help through the day, and you will go about your daily work. When night comes, say a little prayer of thanks. Very likely your sponsor will call you. The sponsor called the new guy. It wasn't the new guy who called the sponsor. Very likely your sponsor will call you either on the phone or in person. He will suggest that you call on other newcomers. And even if you are new, I know sometimes we hear at meetings, people will say, oh, you're new. Keep your mouth shut and listen. Well, this one says, you have nothing to say? You're nearly as much of a newcomer as he is. Definitely you have something to say. And you will find that your story becomes more polished and more convincing with each day of sobriety. The harder you work at sobriety, the easier it is to remain sober. Your sponsor will take you to your meetings. It will all be new to you, but you will find it inspirational. And after you've attended a few meetings, it is your duty to get up on your feet and say something. You definitely have something to say. This was a stick for alcoholics. This was the test. I think the AA pamphlet today has 44 questions. Well, this one had, I think, 20 questions. And this is in the manual. And it's just a lot of questions. It's a test for the newcomer. Do you lose time from work due to drinking? Is drinking making your home life unhappy? Do you drink because you're shy? Is drinking affecting your reputation? Have you gotten into financial difficulties? Does your drinking make you careless of your family's welfare? Has your ambition decreased? Do you want to drink in the morning? Does drinking cause you difficulty in sleeping? Is it jeopardizing your job or business? Have you ever had a loss of memory as a result of drinking? Do you drink to build up your self-confidence? Well, I don't know about you, but me, yes, I passed the test. Yeah, that was me, all right. I had all those problems. So again, in the manual, it talks about now that you're sober, you naturally feel that you want to make restitution in every possible way for the trouble you have caused. You want to get back on the job if you still have a job. Money, you must have money, you think. The next paragraph, it says, well, don't be in a hurry. Sometimes we hear people talk about the early meetings and they went through the steps and did everything in one day or one afternoon. Well, this is AA group number 1. And it says, what the second paragraph, well, don't be in a hurry. You can't do all these things overnight, but you can do them gradually, step by step. You may safely leave these matters to a higher power as you ponder them in your morning period of contemplation. If you are sincerely resolved to do your part, then will be adjusted. Be still and know that I'm God. The next paragraph. Sobriety is the most important thing in your life without exception. You may believe your job or your home life come first, but consider, if you do not get sober and stay sober, chances are you won't have a job, a family, or even sanity or life. The last paragraph is fun. It says, you aren't very important in this world. If you lose your job, someone better will replace you. If you die, your wife will mourn, cry briefly, and then she will remarry. Your children will grow up and they won't even know you. In the last analysis, you are the only one who benefits by your sobriety. The second paragraph that starts, don't criticize the leader. He has his own problems. The next one says, don't criticize the methods of others. Strangely enough, you may change your own ideas as you become older in sobriety. Remember, this is one of my favorite quotes. Remember, there are a dozen roads from New York to Chicago, but they all land in Chicago. The idea is that there are just many ways to do the same thing. It is not the, and then the next one says, it is not the second or fifth or 10th drink that hurts you. It is the first. The last paragraph, what's your hurry? Perhaps you don't feel you're getting the hang of this program as rapidly as you should. Forget it. It probably took you years to get in this condition. You certainly cannot expect a complete cure overnight. And something else that this mentions is the importance of diet and rest play an important part in the rehabilitation of the alcoholic. We've beaten ourselves physically, eaten improper foods, sleeping with the aid of alcohol. We ate a bowl of chili or a hamburger because they were filling and cheap. And our rest was the same. We slept when we passed out. And the last paragraph talks about fresh fruits and vegetables will help. In fact, it is wise move to consult a physician, possibly have a complete physical examination. But taking care of the body is very important, diet and rest. Many members of AA find it helpful, even after a long period of sobriety, to add an extra ration of carbohydrates to their diet. Alcohol turns to sugar in the body. Scientifically, I am not sure that that's true anymore. When we deprive ourselves of alcohol, our bodies want more sugar. And so I like this suggestion. It says, carry candy in your pocket. Eat desserts, ice cream, and malted milk. I remember when I got sober, I started eating boxes of chocolates. The AA program is not a cure in the accepted sense of the word. There's no known cure for alcoholism except complete abstinence. It's been definitely proved that an alcoholic can never again be a normal drinker. But how soon will you be cured of a desire to drink is another matter. It depends entirely upon how quickly you can succeed in changing your outlook on life. We have to change our outlook on life. Then, since this was group number 1, a lot of other groups asked, how do you conduct your meetings? and they have some suggestions. It has been found advisable to hold meetings at least once a week at a specified time and place. Meetings provide a means for an exchange of ideas, the renewing of friendships, opportunity to review the work being carried on, a sense of security, and a reminder that we are alcoholics and must be continually on alert against the temptation to slip backward into the old drunken ways. The next paragraph says, as a newcomer, you may be somewhat bewildered by your first meeting. It's even possible that it will not make sense to you. Many have this experience. But if you find yourself enjoying your first meeting, pause to remember that you probably didn't care for the first drink of whiskey. Yeah, sometimes the meetings getting used to. Again, you may feel like an outsider at your first meeting. Your sponsor should see to it that this is not the case, but even if your sponsor neglects his duty, don't feel too badly. Don't be afraid to horn in, to butt in, to interrupt. If you are being neglected, it is just an oversight and you're entirely welcome. It's possible that you may not even be recognized because your appearance has changed for the better. In a week or two, you'll find yourself in the middle of things and very likely neglecting other newcomers. Attend your first meeting with an open mind. A.A. of Akron gets many inquiries about how to conduct a meeting. Methods different in different parts of the country. There are discussion groups, study groups, meetings where the leader takes up the entire time himself. Here briefly is how the meetings were conducted in Akron. The speaker can be selected from the group, someone from another group or another city, a guest from the ranks of clergymen, doctors, and the judiciary, or anyone who may be of help. The leader opens the meetings with a prayer or asks someone else to pray. The prayer can be original or it can be taken from a prayer book or some publication, such as the Upper Room. The topic is entirely up to the leader. His talk lasts from 20 to 40 minutes, and then they ask for comments or testimonies from the floor. After the meeting closes, 1 hour in Akron. Many early groups had an hour-and-a-half meeting, but it was 1 hour in Akron. The leader asks for announcements, and they end with the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father. Again, the manual ends with a list of the 12 steps and the 4 absolutes. There in Akron, they still focused a lot on the 4 absolutes of absolute honesty, absolute unselfishness, absolute love, and absolute purity. So the manual ended with a list of suggested reading. Reading the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, reading the Bible, the book The Greatest Thing in the World, The Unchanging Friend, the non-theistic, very Buddhist-like book, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, excellent little book. The Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox, The Self You Have to Live With, Psychology of Christian Personality, and Abundant Living. We're going to go kind of quickly in the with the next, but the next pamphlet that they did was how to help you do the 12 steps, a guide to the 12 steps. Now, the thing where the sponsor takes you through the 12 steps, they did not do that. This was to help you take yourself through the steps. Later on, some of the groups started classes for newcomers to help them with the steps. But the way we do it, many do it today, where the sponsor takes you through the steps, they didn't do that. So this pamphlet is called A Guide to the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is a wheel. The introduction says, A Guide to the 12 Steps is intended as a simple, short interpretation of the rules for sober living as compiled by the earliest members. The 12 steps are a logical process by which an alcoholic finds and maintains sobriety and becomes rehabilitated. Upon being asked which one of those spokes of the wheel is the most important, one of the early members once replied, "Which is the most important spoke of a wheel?" Like, which is the most important step? Which is the most important spoke of a wheel? The wheel has 12 spokes, and one is removed, it'll be okay. But they are all helpful. But if we remove some of them, the wheel gets weak. In the first step, we're just going to read what's in the yellow because of time. We can't read it all. By the way, all of these are available online. So after the meeting is over, I can send the links to someone, Shibu or someone, if you want the links to these pamphlets. Without the first step, there's no chance of recovery. It's been demonstrated over and over again that a person becomes sober and stays sober only when he is doing so for himself and himself alone. That's where this comes from, that AA is a selfish program. You have to do it for yourself. You do it for yourself. And if you have been on an airplane, before you take off, you know, the stewardess or the flight attendant will say, in the case of an emergency, put your own oxygen mask on first, you know, before you help other people. We have to be sober before we can help other people. So it is a step in yellow. Again, it is a step which no assistance from an outside source is possible. It is the prospect must make it alone. Only, there is a saying in AA, if you want to get sober, only you can do it. But you can't do it alone. Until the admission is made to ourselves that our alcoholic problem has gone out of control, we have no inspiration to stop drinking. That's number one. Second step, having taken the first step, we naturally ponder what we can do to receive assistance. Looking into the past, we discover that our attempts to give up alcohol through willpower have always failed. We have liked to think, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Little honest thinking convinces us that we have been very miserable failures as captains and masters. Many of us tried doctors and hospitals. Some of us tried religion. Willpower, help from families and friends, medicine, and formal religion having failed, there is but one place to turn. That is to God as we understand him. This is not as difficult as it may seem. You are not asked to go to church. You're not asked to talk to a clergyman. You're only asked to quit trying to run your own life and to keep an open mind. You're asked to accept teaching from a group of people who have ironed out the same problem that you have. Again, when we got into trouble, we ran to our mother or father, knowing there was complete safety in their arms. Picture then God as a universal Father. If your faith is not too strong at first, look around at your new friends in AA. It's just a matter of following the advice of your new friends. Follow the program they lay out for you. Have faith in the program. It has worked for them. It can work for you. Third step, once having come to believe there's a power greater than ourselves, it's not too difficult to turn our lives over to that power. It is at this point that the day-by-day or the 24-hour plan comes to our assistance. We have found that by giving up planning, by letting each day take care of itself, and it always will, we have been able to stay sober. We can't control the future. The past is done and can't be returned. And so if we can do a good job this day, we are doing the best we possibly can, one day at a time. Fourth step. Again, we come to a step that requires courage. One of the chief reasons for drinking was to escape from ourselves. The next paragraph, time has come to actually do something definite about our problem. And the last paragraph, what do we find in our inventory? We have been dishonest, we have lied, we have cheated, we have broken hearts, we have stolen, we have slandered others, we have indulged in extramarital activities, we have cursed God and man, we have broken faith, we have smashed most of the laws of God and man. And most problems can be traced back to alcohol. Here again, on the fifth step, we find a very logical sequence. Having analyzed ourselves, it makes sense to share that, because a trouble shared is a trouble cut in half. It does not mean that we're formally sit down with someone and say, I have done wrong in the following manner. First, I have been this and this and this. If that were the methods used, A.A. would not be the great organization it is today. The A.A. member will pave the way by first telling his story. The newcomer will be amazed at his frankness and ease with which he tells his story, even the bad and sad parts. One or two conversations, fifth step, like this, and the newcomer will begin to unburden himself. Things that he thought he would never tell a living soul start to come out. And as he shares his secrets, his mind becomes unburdened by the terrific weight he has been carrying. He begins to feel that he belongs. Steps 6 and 7 in yellow. It's very likely that we will willingly take the sixth step. Is because we want what our new friends have. We are willing to have God remove all our defects of character. But how do we ask him to do it? In the first place, we cannot bargain with God. Instead of asking for outright help, ask for guidance. Ask merely to be shown the way so that you can do your own part. Ask for guidance one day at a time. Do this humbly. Humility is sometimes difficult to attain. Regardless of who you are but a tiny cog in the great universe. Look at a distant star at night. Remember that it took the light from that star a century or more to reach the earth. Remember, the star on which you gaze could probably swallow the sun without noticing it. Consider that the earth is one of the lesser planets. And then consider your own physical insignificance. It will make you feel small and humble. And then at the bottom there in yellow, where it says very simply, humility is teachability, an open mind to the truth. Steps 8 and 9, at this point that we begin the physical act of rehabilitation. Our debts are of two kinds, the physical and the moral. A very satisfactory way to square accounts is to take a piece of paper and list your debts. This is not an easy step, and we would prefer to forget the past and its debts. But as long as we owe them, they are impossible to forget. They come back to haunt us, and an alcoholic can't afford to be haunted by the past. So we set about paying back our physical debts. There are those long neglected bar bills that we've driven us. There's the doctor and the butcher and the baker and the credit cards and the friend who loaned us money. It is not so easy with the moral debts. Some of these we can never repay. Our employer who gave us many chances, our spouses, there are friends who you have let down. A few apologies are in order here. There are those you have maligned, ridiculed, or slandered. As you make amends, you'll find yourself increasing in strength and stature. Finally, there are your dear ones who tried so hard to love you, to help you. How many times have you broken their hearts? Have you disappointed them? Have you promised to quit drinking only to break promises? Have you let them down in a crisis? and they still love you. Here is a debt that cannot be repaid by words, even though you apologize until the very moment of death. This moral debt can never even fully be repaid by deeds. It can be reduced to a minimum. The history of A.A. sparkles with families reunited and happily living together. But don't expect this miracle to happen overnight. It took you years to become an alcoholic. Recovery cannot be expected in a day or a week or a month. Recovery is not as long as the road to alcoholism, but neither is it as tough. Always remember, easy does it. We must take life and its problems a single thing at a time. The longest journey starts with but a single step. Do not minimize the importance of the 8th and 9th step. 10th step, we find in A.A. that after a few months of sobriety, after the alcohol is out of our systems, our problems are more mental than physical. As long as a person thinks straight, he remains sober. When he goes back to the old alcoholic way of thinking, he gets drunk. There are certain luxuries common to the average person that an alcoholic cannot afford. He cannot afford resentment nor self-pity. He cannot afford envy nor greed. He cannot afford dishonesty of any kind. Our enemy is alcohol, and that enemy is lurking to slay us on the slightest excuse at the single opening. So it's important that we continue to take personal inventory. Perhaps we find ourselves criticizing other people, other members of methods of staying sober. Perhaps you resent something a leader has said. Forget it. It will be your turn to lead before long, and you will probably offend someone yourself. At the end there it says, so take time off occasionally to check up. Are you doing your best? If you are, don't worry. You're making progress. The 11th step, what have I to meditate about? You will awaken in the morning with a clear head and eye. You will not be tortured with fears of what you did the night before. People will be nice to you, cordial, kind, and helpful. Happiness will shine in the faces of your loved ones. You will be free of fear. Each day will add. When you meditate on this new way of living, you cannot but realize there is a God above guiding you through each successive day and night. As you become more conscious of this, you will seem to better understand this guiding power. Even churchmen will admit that prayer, as we commonly hear it, is phrased in language stilted and archaic, old language. It is not hard to say before retiring, thank God for keeping me sober today. Nor is it hard to say in the morning, please God, guide me in the path of sobriety and decent, useful living in this coming day. Make your talks with your guiding power a personal thing. Give thanks for help, and as if you were addressing your earthly father. To be certain that the God to whom you pray will make it easier for you to work out your own salvation. And this is something that Dr. Bob liked. And it says, the camel each day goes twice to his knees. He picks up his load with the greatest of ease. He walks through the day with his head held high and stays for that day completely dry. Like us, we get up in the morning and go on our knees and morning and night, and we stay dry. 12th step. Now you're on your own. Your AA friends have given you your tools and showed you how to use them. From now on, it's your job to fashion your life. Don't be thrown by the phrase spiritual experience. A sudden spiritual experience or awakening is extremely uncommon, a slow process for the average person. We are inclined to confuse spirituality with theology, dogma, creed, and ritual. We must learn the spiritual side of the picture slowly and simply. If you've gone through the first 11 steps, you've come far. It is now time that you're carrying on the work. You owe your sponsor and your group one thing: to carry the blessings of AA to some other alcoholic in need. You will be asked to call on a prospective member. Don't lose any time in doing so. Tell him your story. Tell him what you're trying to do. Tell him what AA has done for others. If you think you're too new, just remember that he is even newer. And if you have been sober only one day, he will look on you as a veteran. Before long, you'll have a baby, a sponsee of your own. Then you'll really have something to live for. You'll worry about him. You'll try to keep sober for him. You'll guide him to the best of your ability, and you will almost suffer with him as he comes out of his alcoholic fog. In doing this, you will be giving of yourself and helping someone else. This was one of the big focuses in early AA. Always keep it before you that the more you put into this work, the more you will take out of it. The harder you work, the more activities you get into, the easier will be your road to sober living. There's no excuse for missing a meeting. There's no excuse for not helping someone when asked to. Share this new life with others. It will repay you 10,000-fold. In conclusion, practice these steps in all your affairs. The 12 steps are not something to be gone through once and then forgotten. They're a set of rules for living that must be practiced at all times, never forgotten. Remember, you're an alcoholic and but one drink away from drunkenness again. Another pamphlet that they wrote was called The Second Reader. So now you've been a member of Alcoholics Anonymous for several weeks, or is it several months? The newness has started to dull just a little. The first glamorous flush of sobriety has started to wear off. Not so much glamour connected with the first weeks in AA. And you've been the center of attention as a newcomer. You have new friends that have gone out of their way to be nice to you. So sometimes that pink cloud, goes away too soon. And you're not a newcomer anymore. You're just another member of the group. The sobriety pattern starts with bewilderment when the program is first explained. It all seems too complicated, particularly to the alcohol-fogged brain. I'm going to skip there. So sometimes it's not so easy. It's not such a smooth path in the beginning, but it's a normal one. And your little tribulations are adding to your stature and your growth. Although unknown to yourself, it's all part of the education of Alcoholics Anonymous. What is there in AA for me beyond plain sobriety? You have kept active, you've attended meetings, you've held long discussions with your friends, you've done 12-step work carrying the program. This pamphlet, therefore, attempts to take up where the initial enthusiasm starts to cool down. It attempts in a measure to answer the very important question, what is there in AA for me besides sobriety? The chief aim of mankind is the move toward the fullness of life. I'm going to talk about 4 different things: work, play, love, and religion. Translating this into terms of the alcoholic, we substitute Alcoholics Anonymous for religion. So work, play, love, and Alcoholics Anonymous. And figure number 1 there is the normal life. It's balanced. It's the same for AA, the same for love, the same for work, and the same for play. Each arm of the cross is equal. The abnormal pattern of our drinking days was that we played too much. There, like in diagram number 2. Diagram number 3, when we come into AA, we have a tendency, and it's probably a good one, to do a lot of AA, to spend a lot of time in AA. And sometimes the family doesn't like that. In figure number 4, we can get back to a well-rounded life eventually, with balance in our life, with time for play, for the family, for love, for work, and for A.A., but with balance in our life. Okay, the first place, a new philosophy tailored by the individual to meet his own needs is in order. Each one of us has to create a new philosophy of life for ourselves based on the 12 steps and what we have learned. If you pattern your life after someone who's been sober 10 or 12 years, you may take your sponsor as an example. At this point, it's well to consider the long range of your future. It's more likely you'll find the philosophy, the pattern that suits you best, that suits your sponsor best, may not be good for you. No two sets of fingerprints are alike. Neither are any two of us exactly alike as to personality, moral fiber, ambitions, likes and dislikes, appetites, philosophy, or any else. The example, sometimes they use the cake as an example. And if you follow these directions, the cake will always come out the same. Well, here in Akron, they don't think so. It says, give 20 women the same ingredients men bake cakes do. Give 20 people the same ingredients to bake a cake. They'll all use flour, milk, flavoring, shortening, and other ingredients. Yet they will come up with 20 entirely different cakes. Your sponsor may add the same ingredients as you, only he will have less of one and more of the other. Some people go to more meetings and some to less. Some meet with their sponsor more and some less. Some meditate and pray, some more, some less. Everyone has their own recipe, and the cake comes out all right if we use all the good ingredients that A.A. has provided. So how to form a philosophy and working plan? Start with the simple tested ingredients, the 12 steps as a basis. If you do not hesitate to discard it, you will find yourself throwing out ideas that seem pretty important when you first discovered them. This is normal, as long as you replace them with equally helpful ideas. Humility is an important part of sobriety. We either go forward or we slip back. Above all, be patient. The forming of a philosophy of life to fully suit your needs may take years. At all times, remember, easy does it. Sometimes we want 20 years of sobriety in 2 weeks. As time passes, it will occur that since not everyone uses the same set formula, there must be something in common. Person A is introspective and examining his soul. B is a great reader and reads a lot. C never misses a meeting. Person D is a group worker, never happy unless he's working for the group. E spends 3 times as many hours as anyone else in the group on 12th step work. On the other hand, A does very little 12th step work. B attends a maximum of 1 a week. People use the tools differently, and yet each is faithful in his sobriety, and each is leading a full life. There is a common denominator. It is simply this: first things first. The first thing in the life of any Alcoholics Anonymous is sobriety. Sobriety above all else, including job, home, family, and faith. Attend a certain meeting every week. Don't permit anything short of sickness or absence from the city to keep you away. Neither heat nor rain nor blizzard kept you away from the corner tavern when you felt the urge to drink. In yellow, talk over the group's affairs and personalities. Mr. So-and-so hasn't been to a meeting for a month. George is doing a magnificent job. Think A.A. all the time, and sobriety will take care of itself. Volunteer to do chores for the group. Bring donuts. Keep away from the bars unless it's absolutely necessary to enter them. You don't have to hang around bars to prove you have willpower. The soldier who stands on top of a hill and challenges the enemy to shoot at him is neither brave nor a hero. He is just a damn fool. The old saying, at least in English in A.A., is if you hang around the barber shop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. If you hang around the bar long enough, you're going to get drunk. And this is kind of an early version of a gratitude list. Do a sales promotion on yourself. Excuse me. Do on personal appearance, health, mental health, family relations, finances. How were things before A.A. and after A.A.? Do this gratitude list of how have I changed? How have things changed? Sobriety can become a habit, but don't expect miracles. It's a long haul proposition. It's a marathon, not a sprint. We can make a little progress every day. We're told at the very beginning that A.A. is a spiritual program, but many of us are perplexed by the meaning. There's no mystery to the spiritual side of A.A. It's not churches and altars and candles and crucifixes and dogmas and ritual and orthodoxy. Boiled down to its essence, Christianity, in fact, spirituality is simply love. And when you're sitting in your living room and they call you and say, I want you to go talk to a drunk, do you tell them, no, it's raining? No, you do not. You get up and you go and do a 12-step call. When you get back to your living room, you feel good because you have tried to carry the message. Out of all this trouble, this disruption of your life, do you expect a pat on the back? Do you expect your sponsee to give you business or become a client? You do not. And even if the person is not a success, if A.A. doesn't take with him, or you're going to throw in the towel, are you going to get drunk yourself? No, you are not. Because in helping another person, you have had a spiritual experience. As we grow older, more critical about the leaders, we hear at meetings, they all talk about their drinking experience. I know the answers when it comes to drinking. I want to know how to stay sober. So the new speaker will naturally talk about things that come easiest to him. But in Akron, they focused a lot on, not so much on the drinking stories like we do today, but more on how to stay sober each day. Suggestions for leaders who are reading a meeting: prepare. Don't depend on your memory. Keep it as brief as possible. When you have said what you want to say, stop. And just very quickly, we'll go through the last couple. This was called Spiritual Milestones in Alcoholics Anonymous, and how to eliminate sin from our lives, develop humility, pray to God, practice charity. If any men or women have completely fulfilled the aims of Alcoholics Anonymous without some grasp of the spiritual, or to use, few people have been able to do this without some sort of spirituality. Now, where can I find a simple step-by-step religious guide? The 10 Commandments gave us the thou shalts and thou shalt nots. The 12 steps of A.A. give us a program of dynamic action. But what about a spiritual guide? How can we eliminate sin or defects from our lives? In the 12 and 12, it talks about the 7 deadly sins. And we can do that by personal house cleaning and inventory, by developing humility. Humility is teachability, the willingness to learn and keeping an open mind. Constantly praying to God for guidance. Ask him for guidance but we must do the work. We ask God for a map, but we have to do the driving. It's logical to believe that if all men in the world prayed for peace, peace would happen. But every man would have to do his part. Practicing charity. This is simply another way of saying practice the 12th step. Jesus' 2 commandments. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. The Jewish rabbi Hillel, who lived at the time of Christ, said, "What is hateful to thee, do not do unto thy fellow man." Meditate frequently on our newly found blessings, giving honest thanks for them. This is self-evident, and if one possesses the least spark of gratitude for his sobriety, so gratitude is spontaneous. Step 6, take God into our confidence in all acts. We did not hesitate when young to talk things over with Dad. The Jehovah of the Old Testament was a stern, wrathful God, ever ready to punish. That, however, is not God as Christ teaches it. The God of the New Testament is like Dad, kindly and helpful, full of compassion and ever ready to forgive. We should always strive to make God a companion rather than someone from whom we constantly demand gifts. Seek the companionship of others who are seeking the spiritual life. This we do in A.A. meetings. Sometimes certain members seem to be more spiritual, and they practice meditation more. We hang around with people like that. Many groups also have meditation meetings. Some even yoga and other types of meditation meetings. There were 3 generations of ethical thinking behind Moses when he inscribed the 10 Commandments. Who can say first who discovered the 24-hour plan of A.A.? Where does it come with our program? One of your own ideas may within a year or 2 be accepted as a tenet of A.A. of Alcoholics Anonymous. We are your people. You're safe in our company. It would be nice if God were a stately old gentleman. In yellow there, the blind men in J.G. Saxe's poem, The 6 Blind Men. Don't know if you're familiar with this story, but they were blind, and each one of them was asked to describe what is an elephant. And each one felt the tusk and said, "Oh, an elephant is a spear." And another one, his tail, and he said, "It's a rope." Or depending on one of them felt the big leg and said, "Oh, it's a tree." However, we decide for ourselves what a higher power is. Let's examine the fine minds of history. Some of the favorite sayings. Here is one. The spiritual life is by no means a Christian monopoly. There is not an ethical religion in the world that does not teach to a great extent the principles of love, charity, and goodwill. The Jehovah of the Hebrews, yet the great Hebrew prophets taught a message of social justice. Followers of Muhammad are taught to help the poor, give shelter to the homeless and the traveler, and conduct themselves with personal dignity. Consider the 8-part program laid down in Buddhism: right view, right aim, right speech, right action, right living, right effort, right mindedness, and right contemplation. The Buddhist philosophy is exemplified by these 8 points, could be literally adopted by A.A. as a substitute for or addition to the 12 steps. The power of God has been likened to electrical power that runs our homes. The 12 steps are a steep, hard climb. But as we make the climb, we can make it easier by remembering there are 2 handrails on each side of the 12 steps, God and the fellowship. Another pamphlet that came out is called What Others Think of Alcoholics Anonymous. The speaker told how he ended 35 years of drinking by trying various methods till he finally got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is the last pamphlet, and it's called The Speaker's Guide. And as I mentioned, they didn't talk so much about what we call the drunkalogue and my past history as they did about how to stay sober. So this was a speaker's guide from Akron. It says, this leaflet has been prepared by members of the Akron Friday Forum Luncheon Club. It's hoped that it may be of value to all the speakers, regardless of their amount of sobriety. First rule, be brief. Your talk deserves the best effort you can put into it. Anything having to do with sobriety deserves nothing but the best. You can avoid the embarrassment of stumbling around, groping for words and ideas if you will use the forethought of preparation. This does not mean sit down and write out a speech, but organize your subject matter beforehand. If you have doubts as to your memory, prepare written notes. After preparing them, follow them closely, or you may get off on a tangent. Find yourself in the weeds and have difficulty in finding your way back to your notes. You owe your audience some consideration. To speak before a group with no preparation is an insult to their intelligence. Next rule, be brief. There is a saying among modern clergymen, no souls are saved after the first 20 minutes. The 2-hour, yes, even the 1-hour sermon is a thing of the past. In almost all cases, effectiveness is lost after 30 minutes. And here I am talking for an hour and a half. After the first half hour, the average listener starts to wonder when the speaker will come to a climax and stop talking. His mind wanders, and what good the leader has done in his first half hour immediately becomes undone. Remember, alcoholics are restless people. We started out the meeting with 29 people, and now we are down to 21. Alcoholics are restless people. They don't like to listen too much, and they like to read less. The next rule is to be brief. I don't know if you're familiar with what the Gettysburg Address is, but it was a famous speech given by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. And there was one speaker who talked for 2 hours, and no one remembers what he said. And yet every school child can remember what Lincoln's talk was. It was about 4 minutes, and it's historical. The next rule is to be brief. Speak up, don't mumble. Trained speakers in the days before public address systems developed a hard and fast rule. Talk to someone, a friend if possible, in the very back row. Keep calm and don't mumble. If you speak deliberately, you may not crowd in as many words, but at least they will be understood. The next rule is to be brief. Your audience knows you're an alcoholic and a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Your presence on the platform is proof of that, except in a few rare occasions where the speaker may be a non-alcoholic and will be introduced as such. Consequently, it's ridiculous to qualify yourself. This was something they did a lot in New York. Bill started that in New York, to qualify yourself, to talk about all your years of being drunk. In Akron, they said it's ridiculous to qualify yourself. We know you're an alcoholic, you're here. It may be necessary to give some of your drinking history to Illustrate what obstacles you had to overcome to become a practicing AA, but keep it to a bare minimum. Avoid as you would the plague a blow-by-blow account of your drinking days and experiences. There are probably a dozen persons or more in the audience who can beat you at that story. A recitation of drinking experience has a definite place in the AA program. It establishes a bond between the AA and the man who someday may be a member. Like on a 12-step call, that's when we tell our story. It helps convince the new man that he's not the only one in the world who has a problem. So your drinking story is valuable when you call on the prospect at his home, in jail, or in a hospital. But at a meeting, the audience is more interested in what you have done to stay sober. Draw on your drinking experience to illustrate points and make an end of it. How I keep sober should be the top topic of every AA talk. And again, what's the rule? Be brief. Here are some suggestions. Don't try to cover everything you know in one talk. You probably will be invited to lead at some future date. Try to use as much new material as possible in each talk. The man who heard you Monday night might hear you again on Thursday. No one knows all the answers. Don't give the impression that you're an exception to this rule. Don't read lengthy poems or quotations of any kind. They are boresome. If you must quote, be brief. Don't criticize. Leave that for your 5th anniversary. And when your 5th anniversary comes, don't criticize. Be sincere. Don't be dramatic or play to the grandstand. Don't get involved in complicated analogies. Someone has already built the ladder or constructed the house, probably better than you can. Don't be too positive. Rather have strong suspicions. Many a man who is, quote, never going to take another drink on Tuesday night is drunk by Wednesday morning. Don't feel you must have a weighty answer to every comment from the floor. If you have no simple comment, a thank you will handle the situation. When you are finished with your talk, sit down. So I'm going to sit down.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for your presentation. It's a quite more information about 1940 or that time, how AA started, or how AA members speak in the meeting, and how they deal with the newcomers, and
Yes.
how to deal with the sponsors and sponsors. There is lot of information. And I really thanks to you. And my question is, this pamphlet is still available in Amazon or something?
The pamphlets?
Yeah.
The pamphlets are available. Actually, sometimes on the internet, they're available at the Cleveland Interclub sells them, the pamphlets. And I will, after the meeting's over, I'll send a couple of links. One link where you can order the pamphlets themselves. And then I'll also have the links for finding the text online.
Thank you very much. And
Yeah, but I agree with you. What you said, I think, is very important. I think that it was a lot of reading today, but I think it's important to know how they did it in the early days. And Akron had a much better success rate than New York did. When the big book came out, there were more stories in there from Akron than there were. And I think it was pretty simple language. And that's what Dr. Bob wanted, something that everybody could easily understand. And I think that's the important thing. Very, very practical advice, I think.
Thank you, Jim.
Uh-huh. Anyone have any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Yeah. But
Thank
it's
you,
a
Jim.
full.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
My pleasure.
It's pretty understandable. Everybody know. But what about the next week? What is Bill's a spiritual experience, or what you are going to presentation for next Tuesday?
Pardon?
Next
Oh,
Tuesday, what is?
Yeah, I can't do that one until after December. The one on Bill's spiritual experiences.
So what is for next week? Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Okay. We'll go
Cleveland,
with
yeah.
the Cleveland. Okay.
Yeah, I will. All
Thank
right.
you, Jim.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. And, we will close with the serenity prayer.